Joining us back again is Congressman Andy Biggs of the 5th Congressional District from Arizona, who also has a really high score on the Freedom Index. So check out the Freedom Index on the newamerican.com. In fact, Congressman Biggs has a 100% score in the last print issue of the Freedom Index. Congressman Biggs, thank you again for being with us today.
Christian, it's good to be with you.
In January, we saw the legislatures of the states of Wisconsin and Nebraska pass resolutions applying to Congress to call a constitutional convention, or a convention of states, as some of these groups are calling it now, calling ostensibly, quote, for limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that propose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress. Now, what are your thoughts about resolutions like this that are being passed in states across the country, petitioning Congress to call a constitutional convention to supposedly restrain and rein the federal government in?
Well, I'm very sympathetic to that point of view and that effort, although I disagree with it, with what they want to accomplish. So let's tell you why. You're talking about Article 5 of the Constitution, and Article 5 is I think far clearer in some areas and less clear in other areas. So a lot of these folks, and I've debated them many times for many years now, and I actually wrote a book about it because I was castigated so often for my position. But here's the bottom line. You cannot take Congress out of the equation, number one. And number two, there is nothing limiting that can be done to prevent this convention from expanding what it does beyond the call. So if you have people calling, by the way, they keep changing the call, right? I mean, the petition to Congress for the call. Congress writes the call, and Congress will do more than just a ministerial function, which means that they do more than just actually take something in. What they do is they actually write the call, and so they can write it to do whatever they want it to do. And if you think the corrupt insiders in Washington, D.C. are going to let a convention to change and alter the Constitution to make it what people believe will be tighter and restrain folks, I think you don't understand what's happening in Congress. I'm a big believer that it isn't the Constitution that's the problem. It is the people who ignore the Constitution that usurp power and abuse the constitutional power that they ostensibly have. That's the real issue. I mean, it could go on, Christian, but let's get to you. Whatever specifically you want to know about, I'm happy to talk about this subject at length.
Absolutely. So if Congress were to call the convention today, then would it be the states who would be determining who the delegates are? Would they really be in control, like they're being sold in terms of the groups proposing the so-called convention of states, or would Congress have a lot more say than what many state legislators perhaps realize?
Congress is going to have a lot more say. So it could determine that the state legislative body is going to be the delegation to debate what they think should be who their delegates should be, or they can have an individual committee over there. It's a problem, and that's part of why this is a dangerous thing, is because the delegates themselves on who will be the delegation are not defined per se. So there was one group that was telling people that just so you know, the leader of that group called me up and said, Andy, if you will stop opposing an Article 5 convention, we will guarantee that you'll be the president of that convention. And I said, you can't guarantee that because the Constitution doesn't allow that, nor does it allow you the power the plenary power you think it does to nominate and appoint delegates to come to the convention.
I mean, wouldn't the delegates of the convention theoretically choose their own convention president? I mean, wasn't that how George Washington was, in fact, elected the president of the Philadelphia Convention back in 1787?
Yeah, as I explained to that guy, and I explained in my book, The Con of the Con, Um, every legislative body is a self-governing body. And that means, so like we in the Congress or any state legislature, or in fact, in most city councils, they adopt rules, they elect their leaders. Those are the first two things they do whenever they start a new session. So when you have a constitutional convention, like you had, the last time we had this was in 1787, you're exactly right. They adopted rules of process and procedure, and they elected a president. And George Washington was elected president, and they had their rules, and they determined, right now it's not even clear. They determined at that time that each state would have one vote. Each state would have one vote. But that was purely because that's how those delegates decided to govern their convention. In a new convention, do you think California, with the largest population in the country, or New York or Illinois, is going to say, we want to have the same number of votes on any issue as Wyoming or Rhode Island or any smaller state, or South Dakota, whatever state only has one one member of Congress? No.
What about the argument that convention advocates make that anything that comes out of the convention, let's say it's a terrible amendments that empower the federal government or a radical new socialist constitution, that a small handful of states could stop it because you need 3/4 to ratify, so a little more than a quarter could block something. Does that argument really hold any water?
Look, you got within one vote of passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, which is a horrific amendment. You got the 16th Amendment was passed, which is the income tax. You got the 17th Amendment, which emasculated vestiges of state sovereignty by making senators elected by popularity, and that's been a travesty, and that's why you get the Commerce Clause and other things being abused by Congress, is because these senators now not only represent the states, but they're national political figures instead of being beholden to the state legislature. So we have a history, a demonstrable history, of bad amendments being ratified by the states.
So as a former state legislator yourself, having served in the Arizona House, the Arizona Senate, and even being the president of the Arizona Senate, what advice do you give to other state legislators today who may be frustrated at Washington? What should the states be doing, or can they do, to at least try to mitigate some of this federal overreach that's bearing upon them?
Well, first of all, they need to stop taking federal money wherever they possibly can, because it always comes with mandates and strings. And then they need to stand up and say, we're willing to forego some funding to stop, to get our own sovereignty back. Like Oklahoma said, we're going to get out of Common Core. And the federal government said, well, then we're going to take away your transportation funding. I was hoping that Oklahoma would say, you can take it, and we're going to stop sending you some of our tax money, and we're going to keep it here. In other words, you're going to have to confront with strength what's happening, the federal government. The second thing is you need your attorneys general have to be litigating a lot of these issues and fight on that front. And the third thing is you have to elect constitutional conservatives to go to Congress. But I'm going to tell you right now, this does not get saved in the United States Congress. It gets saved at the state level and the local level, but particularly with the state legislatures and strong governors. That would be fantastic. And I'm just going to tell you, it's a dangerous thing to open up the United States Constitution to unlimited amendments.
Excellent advice, Congressman, and thank you so much for your time, of course, today. And we hope to have you back on again in the future as opportunities present themselves. So, Congressman Biggs, thank you so much again, and take care and God bless.
Thank you, Christian.